Okay, here we are with the internal anatomy. So once you have dissected your worm, you've gotten it cut with the scissors all the way down from the anterior end to at least part of the way through the clitellum. We're going to want to start down here by the mouth, by that anterior end. We'll look what used to be the prostomium that we've now cut through right here, that lip that covers the mouth. Right next to it, we've got this tan structure here, and I've actually, when I did my dissection, it's I spliced it a little bit there. But this is the pharynx. And that's going to just help the worm bring food in, and it's going to move that food down to the esophagus. Okay, and the esophagus is going to be this tan tube. It's kind of hard to see through the septum, those tissues that separate the segments here, but the esophagus is going to move from the pharynx all the way down here to this dark sac called the crop. Okay, in the crop, the food's going to pick up some digestive juices. It's going to help make things, soften things up a little bit, and then it'll go into the gizzard. Now, the crop is going to be a little bit squishy, so if you get a chance, go ahead and poke it with your pen and see how different the tissues are in the crop from the gizzard, which is next, and that's going to be a little bit more structured. It's a firm structure here. So the food will move to the gizzard, and then finally to the intestine. Okay, now I've actually cut through my intestine today. There was a purpose for that, but the intestine is this dark structure, and it's going to go all the way down the length of the worm. It'll finally end at the very bottom at the anus, where all that digested food will eventually be excreted. So we want to move back up here, and that's the digestive system. That's the end of it. We want to move back up here to the beginning of the circulatory system. And what you see are these little dark flaps over top of the esophagus. Here's one, here's another. If you kind of dig around a little bit, there should be 5 of these flaps. 3, 4, and those are actually the pseudo hearts. They're going to help to pump blood through the closed circulatory system of the earthworm. So they're not going to be fully developed hearts like we see in some of our more complex animals, but they do the trick for the earthworm. That's all we need. On top of our intestine here, that I have completely butchered, but on top of our intestine, you're going to see this dark vessel here, and that's the dorsal blood vessel, and that's the one true vessel in the earthworm. There'll be small ones coming off of it, but this is the dorsal one. Remember that the dorsal end of the worm is the top part of the worm, where if you're looking down on it, it's got that dark color, and the reason it's got the dark color is because of this dorsal blood vessel. It kind of gives the skin a darker fleshy tone. If we were to cut all the way through the intestine and move it out of the way here, we can see it's a tan cord back here that goes down the length of the worm, and that's the nerve cord. Okay, the nerve cord goes all the way back up to this anterior end close to the mouth, but on the opposite side of the pharynx that we can't really get to. That's going to be like the brain of the worm. It's called the suprapharyngeal ganglia. So it's not a fully developed brain either, but it does control that one nerve cord that we have in the animal. So we're going to be able to see it move and see how it controls its body through that. Now, when we look back up here again where the hearts and the esophagus are, we're going to see these tan, kind of bubbly looking things. They're your seminal vesicles, And your seminal vesicles are going to produce your testes and your ovaries. Now, because we had to cut the skin and kind of rip it apart this way and that, we've actually ripped the testes and the ovaries, so we can't see them, but they're normally attached to these seminal vesicles that aid in reproduction. So our worms do have both male and female reproductive parts, which makes them hermaphroditic. So that's an interesting fact about these worms. And that should be the internal anatomy of our earthworms.